Hello guys, and welcome to a new video. Blizzard has announced some changes and buffs to healers in patch 10.25, and we're going to look at all the changes. We're going to look at how that might impact the meta, both in raids and Mythic Plus, and we're going to talk about the general state of healers and healing in this patch. So let's go and get started, and the first healer is going to be a healer that got buffs. Is going to be Restoration Druid. You can see right here, Swiftman, Growth Guardians, Wild Growth, Regrowth, and Efflorescence. All of these abilities had their mana cost reduced, and if you're someone or Resto Druid who's playing in raid content, you probably have been waiting for this for a very long time. Resto Druid greatly suffers from mana consumption in raid content. In Mythic Plus, honestly, Resto Druid doesn't really need a whole lot of changes in Mythic Plus content. Again, these changes will impact Resto Druids in Mythic Plus, and maybe you do have some mana issues and some high tyrannical keys, and this will help you out a bit. But at the end of the day, Resto Druid in Mythic Plus absolutely slaps. Arguably one of the best healers out there in high keys and everything. Honestly, I've been having a blast playing Resto Druid in Mythic Plus. In raids, this is a very welcome change. I'm honestly also kind of surprised not to see Rejuvenation being in the list of mana cost reduced spells, because Rejuvenation plays a really big part in raids and it doesn't play as big of a part in Mythic Plus content. And for me, it felt like it would be a really good way of buffing Restoration Druids in raids without buffing them too much in Mythic Plus, but I guess Blizzard had other ideas. Let me know how you feel about this. And just to showcase an example of the mana consumption, you can see here, this is Mythic rating for Resto Druids who are doing really high HPS in terms of which builds they're running and which trinkets they're running. And you can see here, 7 Spine is very popular because it is a mana trinket, partly due to the fact of how it interacts or which spells it impacts, but it is a very popular mana trinket. You can see the people who got really lucky with Spark of Hope as well. I'm just trying to indicate that a lot of raiding Resto Druids are going to be running mana trinkets because their mana consumption, it is an issue, and I think the changes they're doing for Resto Druids, it's very much warranted and wanted. Let me know if you're someone who raids or primarily raids as Resto Druid, and if you think these changes are enough. And now let's go to the plethora of Holy Paladin changes that they did. They finally acknowledged... Wait. Shield of Righteous damage increased by 30%, Consecration damage increased by 30%. Don't get me wrong. These changes, damage increases, I'm all welcome for that. Especially considering Consecration can make up a decent portion of your DPS in something like a Mythic Plus key. But out of all of the changes, and this is coming from someone who's maining Holy Paladin in raid, out of all of the changes that they could have done to Holy Paladin, the issues that they have right now, I'm not talking about the numbers. The Holy Paladin numbers, whatever. I'm talking about the gameplay. I'm talking about the fact that Holy Power spenders, they don't seem to move bars at all. I'm talking about the fact that you can't have mana issues as a Holy Paladin, especially in something like raid environment where you're running that Beacon of Virtue type of build, which is very, very popular for anyone who's doing Mythic raid content as Holy Paladins and they want to pump HPS. Beacon of Virtue is very popular. There is so many things that I kind of expected for them to change. And the fact that Blizzard only chose to increase the damage, it almost makes me angry, because that makes me believe that they don't feel Holy Power spenders is an issue. They don't feel that mana consumption is an issue. They don't feel that the current gameplay of Holy Paladin is an issue. And again, this is just me. This is my subjective opinion. I've been doing Mythic Farak. Once I finish Mythic Farak, my Paladin is benched. I'm not playing my Paladin until I see some substantial gameplay changes. I'm happy you're increasing the damage of Holy Paladin. I'm happy that Consecration is getting buffed. It is going to help Holy Paladins who are doing that Mythic Plus content and things like that. Do I think Holy Paladin gameplay is fun in the current patch? I think there's a lot of things that could have changed, a lot of things that Blizzard could have fixed, and the fact that they didn't want to touch those aspects makes me believe that the Holy Paladin is going to stay the way that it is until the next expansion, which is extremely, extremely disappointing. Again, I might be wrong. Maybe there's going to be more changes. Let me know how I feel about this. Maybe I'm the only one person who feels like this. Maybe I am. Again, I'm living in my bubble and things like that. Let me know how you feel about the Holy Paladin changes. Again, buffs are buffs. And now let's go to Priest. And Holy Priest received quite a few changes. Honestly, quite a few of them are quite nice. And I think Blizzard is looking at all of these healers who are perceived, or the community perception is not all that amazing. And Holy Priest is one of those healers, especially when it comes to Mythic Plus content. So Holy World Sanctifies healing increased by 25%. That's nice. Healing increased by 25%. This wasn't a huge part of your rotation, but we'll see if that's going to change. Flash healing increased by 15%. Again, nice. Chastise damage increase, Smite damage increase, and Shadow World Pain damage increase. So DPS increases, single target healing increases, and AoE healing increases. So Blizzard is actually covering all the bases here, and I think that's nice. I think Holy Priest definitely deserved a lot of these buffs, and Holy Priest has received so many buffs. It's an indication that Blizzard really got their balancing kinda off at the start of this season. And lastly, Restoration Shaman, we've seen some buffs yet again. Again, Shaman is one of those classes that received quite a few buffs throughout. All healing increased by 5%. Honestly, I really like this change, because the way I see it is that there's multiple reasons or multiple problems with Restoration Shaman, or even Shaman in general. And I think Blizzard chose to increase the healing, or the overall healing of Shamans, of Restoration Shamans, instead of trying to fix the tier set, because I think the tier set can be somewhat lackluster depending on which content you're doing, Mythic Plus or Raids, and depending if you play towards the tier set. So instead of trying to buff or change or do something with the tier set, they opt into, hey, we're just going to increase all your healing. And that's great, because tier sets are borrowed power. So overall, this 5% healing increase, very much welcome. I think this is going to be something that a lot of Resto Shamans are going to enjoy. And in terms of the damage, Lava Burst damage increase, Flame Shock damage increase, and Lightning Bolt damage increase. And I don't think Resto Shaman's damage is all that bad. Again, I'm talking about Mythic Plus content. I've played my Resto Shaman in Mythic Plus, and I think the Shaman's DPS, if you're allowed to DPS, you have to remember, Shaman is one of those classes where you will have to sacrifice healing if you are going to DPS or press DPS abilities outside of something like AG, or something outside of like Healing Rain, because Healing Rain with Acid Rain is honestly really fun to play around. So more than welcome changes. I'm happy that they're looking at healers. That, again, Resto Shaman is not perceived to be all that amazing in all forms of content. I'm happy they're doing that. Let's go and talk about the state of healers. So let's talk about how healers are performing both in Raids and Mythic Plus right now in patch 10.25. Again, this is 75 percentile. You can go to 95 percentile, is somewhat similar as well, but overall, the HPS of a healer doesn't determine whether they're good or bad, especially in Mythic raiding content where you want to min-max raid buffs, for example, Holy Paladin or Paladin in general bringing auras, things like Devo Aura. There is ways of actually tracking Devo Aura contribution in Warcraft logs right now. They don't show up here, but you can show them up on personal logs and things like that, and you can really see how much Devo Aura can contribute. And this is why, or one of the reasons why Holy Paladin was included in a lot of these Race to World First boss skills. But overall, Holy Priest getting buffs, I think that's very nice. I think it's needed. Resto Shaman HPS is not all that bad, honestly, considering that it does provide Spirit Link Totem. It can provide certain amount of utility. Holy Priest is going to climb because of the changes. Resto Druid is going to climb because of the mana reduction to a lot of the spells. I kind of hope there could have been more changes, but again, Blizzard is stuck in this position where how do we buff Resto Druid in raids without buffing them in Mythic Plus? Because honestly, there are people who are calling for Resto Druid nerfs in Mythic Plus content. That's how strong Resto Druids are in Mythic Plus. And we have to look at the outlier. Mistweaver escaped nerfs, and honestly, I'm relatively happy about that, because how often can you say, and I'm going to say this in terms of the best healers right now when looking at all forms of content, PvE, Mythic Plus, raids. The best healer right now is Mistweaver Monk. When you look at the general picture, Mistweaver Monk performs really well in Mythic Plus content. Mistweaver performs exceptionally well in Mythic raiding, to an extent that if you're someone who's doing Mythic raiding right now and you're creating a healing roster, if you don't have a Mistweaver Monk in your composition, in your healing composition, you are going to greatly suffer on certain bosses, especially on something like Mythic Farak, where, for the people who don't know, there is a big ad that you need to heal beside the small ads, and Mistweaver can handle the big ad healing like no other healer can. And honestly, doing Mythic Farak without Mistweaver Monk, I don't know if I want to put myself through any of that stress. So Mistweaver Monk, borderline mandatory in that Mythic raiding content and really good in Mythic Plus, did not receive any nerfs, and I'm happy for Mistweaver Monk to continue reigning, because again, I talked about this. How many times Mistweavers have been considered to be OP in World of Warcraft? This is one of the few times. And Preservation Evoker. I want to talk about Preservation Evoker a little bit, because I felt like Preservation Evoker received some significant changes in patch 10.25. And that is mainly to do with how reversion works. There's multiple buffs and nerfs with reversion. And I've been playing Preservation Evoker, and honestly, I've been gearing my Rat 445 or 450 item level Preservation Evoker in these Mythic Plus keys and these 18s and things like that. And I'm honestly really surprised about the output you can do, and it's really fun. But you can do like 5 keys, and you can have 4 keys where you absolutely carry the group, because Evoker feels pretty nice. And then you can have a 5th key where you have a lot of ranged and a boss that requires spreading. And then you're like, okay, yeah, I really hate Preservation Evoker now because of the range limitations. I think the experiment is over. Let's give Preservation Evokers 40-yard range healing. I think the whole limitation of range did not work out. If you look at some of the... We'll look at Mythic Plus, and again, if we look at Mythic Plus in terms of sub-creation data, you can see give Preservations the range increases, the normal range that other healers have, and I think more people will be inclined to play Evoker because not many people are playing this right now. And again, this is sub-creation data. I don't want people to take this as an absolute like confirmation of the best healers and things like that. This is player or real player driven data. At the end of the day, Evoker is not as bad as it made out to be here. It's also to do with the fact that you have to compete with augmentation, things like that. But the general consensus in rating, Mistweaver Monk, the absolute king, mandatory healer, and a lot of mythic rating in order to actually make the fights a lot easier. Restoration Shaman is going to get better. You'll see Holy Priest getting better. You see Restoration Druid getting better. Do I think that they're going to be absolutely mandatory? No. I just think buffs are buffs, especially to classes that seem to be somewhat underperforming. And in terms of like Holy Paladin, for me, I talked about this. I think they need serious gameplay changes. I think the numbers are okay depending on which content you're doing. But I think the gameplay has severely, in my eyes, it's severely deteriorated depending on... Again, if you like that caster, hard casting type of gameplay, you probably don't really hate Holy Paladin all that much. And I think if you play certain builds, you can play around that mana constraints and things like that. But overall, I think Holy Paladin since patch 10.15 has gone in the downward spiral. And I'm not talking about purely on numbers, I'm talking about also the gameplay. And the fact that Blizzard is only increasing the damage, which is nice. Don't get me wrong, I like buffs to damage. I enjoy healer damage a lot. But out of all the changes that Blizzard could have done for Holy Paladin and they chose those, it's I don't want to talk about this. Let's talk about Mythic Plus. So in terms of Mythic Plus, again, we've seen this chat before, sub-creation data. I don't want people to pay attention too much to all this, but the top 3 healers are still going to exist here. Discipline Priest, Restoration Druid, Mistweaver Monk. I have played all the healers so far, and in my opinion, honestly, I think the easiest healers to pug high-end Mythic Plus content would be Resto Druid and Mistweaver, and Discipline Priest would fall a little bit lower because I feel with Discipline Priest you don't have the same utility that these 2 healers have depending on the build. Again, Resto Druid can have an interrupt, but you might not have an interrupt because you need to get extra defensives because you're doing really high keys. But I generally feel I have more control and it's less punishing to play with Restoration Druid or something like Mistweaver Monk versus Discipline Priest. But if you're an absolute god tier Discipline Priest with a really good group that can make use of the PI, Discipline Priest is going to be a really good option. So it really depends. Do you have an organized group or do you end up pugging a lot of keys? So you can see Holy Paladin is still here, Holy Priest, Restoration Shaman, and Preservation Evoker being at the very bottom. Again, that's partly due to the fact that no one is playing Preservation Evoker right now. That you have to compete with Augmentation Evoker. Augmentation Evoker, again, Augmentation is not as good as it used to be in Season 2. Augmentation is something that is very popular in some high keys where survivability is an issue, but Augmentation is not as good as it used to be. People need to realize that. But Preservation, I want Blizzard to remove the range restrictions, give them 40 yards because no one's playing Preservation. Keep in mind, this is auto-generated tier list by sub-creation. This is using real player information. This is more of a popularity contest than anything else. And in terms of what's changing, in my opinion, again, you're looking at buffs to Holy Priest, you're looking at buffs to Resto Shaman. There's some buffs to Holy Paladin in terms of damage. There's buffs to Restoration Druid. Is meta going to change? I don't think it's going to do a whole lot. At the end of the day, for something like Restoration Shaman, what would make Resto Shaman meta? In my opinion, I think Shamans in general need to have a raid buff, and a buff that's something fits their fantasy and things like that. You have to look at Enhancement Shaman. Enhancement Shaman have Wind Fury Totem. Why can't Elemental Shaman and Restoration Shaman have an equivalent of that? I know in PvP you have something like Sky Fury Totem. Why not have one for PvE that is balanced around that? And I think only then people will be like, hey, we really could use a Resto Shaman because we need that buff that Shamans provide that no other class does. And Shaman doesn't really have that right now, especially considering that Resto Shamans used to be the only healers that provide Bloodlust. That is no longer the case. So Shaman is missing some of that identity, in my opinion, to bring it to the next level. But guys, let me know how you feel about this video. Let me know how you feel about the raids. Which healer are you playing right now? Again, we talked about the changes to healers. I don't think it's going to do a whole lot in terms of mixing the meta or changing the meta. But at the end of the day, the meta only affects or should only affect a small percentage of people when you're pushing the highest keys in the world or you're doing the highest mythic raid bosses. There is a reason why certain comps are better for something like Mythic Farak versus certain other classes. At the end of the day, this shouldn't impact too many people, but I know community perception exists. I know community perception can decline you from getting invited. Let me know if Blizzard did the right thing with the buffs here. Maybe they missed out on certain classes. Maybe your class needed some changes. Let me know. And if you enjoyed this type of video, like and subscribe, and I'll see you in my next guide.